is also rather good. Can I invite Dr. Leanne Henry, Reader in Marine Ecology at the University of Edinburgh, and the Scientific Director of Mara Consultants to the stage with her in-person panelists. Leanne will now be chairing panel 5 on the scientific and technical body Q&A, and this will run through to our coffee break at 11:30. So, hopefully, yeah.
Finally over. Is this on already?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
That's okay.
Hi. Really good to see you again. I saw you yesterday. I didn't want to interrupt. Hello, Julia.
Hi.
Nice to finally meet you.
Yes, indeed.
Welcome. Thank you again for coming. Do you want to do your slides as I ask you your question? We are a bit tight for time, but yeah. No, see you. Thank you. Okay, welcome to panel 5. I know the last panel ran a bit over. I'm conscious of when the coffee break is, but it must be difficult to run a panel when you've got to use the word operationalizing and interoperability many times. I'm going to try and avoid using words like that. I am a scientist, but I appreciate that we have to sometimes. So panel 5 is the scientific and technical body Q&A. This was nicely lined up in our last panel about the importance of it. We're going to dive a lot deeper in this. So quick introductions. My name is Leanne Henry. I'm Associate Professor, University of Edinburgh. I'm a deep sea ecologist as well, and one of the co-directors of MARA. I wanted to thank our wonderful host here in Brazil, INPO, Andre, and your team. I especially wanted to also highlight the student volunteers for volunteering their time to help, and we hope that you also are listening to the scientific and technical body panel. I think there's lots of ways that you can get involved in that science policy interface. So yes, less than an hour now to go, 40 minutes before the coffee break. I'm aware we'll have to keep you entertained so that time evaporates as quickly as possible. And with me on stage and online today, I'm really happy to introduce you to various heads of organizations and research leaders with decades of experience on building these bodies, working within them. They understand the challenges, the constraints, but the opportunities as well. So I'd like to just do a quick round table of introductions. First of all, directly next to me, sitting next to me is Dr. Christine Gable. Christine is on stage representing as a co-lead of the Deep Ocean Stewardship Initiative BBNJ Working Group. We also have Cécile Estevin, the Director General of INPO. Julien Barbier, Head Marine Policy and Regional Coordination, IOC UNESCO. And we have 2 speakers online as well. So I don't know if we can, well, perhaps we won't have them up just at the moment, but they have joined us, I believe. We have Carl O'Brien, President of the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea. And we also are joined online by David Obura, the Director at Cordio East Africa and the Chair of IPBES, the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. So a wealth of experience joining us. Today they're going to be sharing all their experiences, knowledge, and research with us to help us all think about what would make an effective and equitable STB. This is going to be a huge challenge. There are so many open questions about the composition of who's going to be on this body. How will they be selected? Who should be selected? And all sorts of different questions that we'll get to. So I do want to open with my very first question to Christine, as a leading scholar in this field, actually. Very delighted to have you joining us. So first of all, Article 49 of the agreement establishes, or is supposed to be establishing, this scientific and technical body. And it's supposed to start to get those terms and references up and running at the first COP. The latest PrepCom did actually draft out some original terms of references of these modalities or ways of working. It's going to be tasked with many items. We heard already that they're going to be tasked with making recommendations on environmental impact assessments, and other time-bound, time-limited things like reviewing and assessing ABMT proposals and making recommendations on emergency measures. So Christine, This is a huge, demanding, and very broad mandate for what could be a relatively small body of people, less than the number of people perhaps in the first 3 rows of this room. Can you suggest ways of designing it to ensure its composition can deliver the detailed expertise that's needed in 5 minutes or less?
Thanks, Leanne, and thank you to the organizers and the invitation to speak. I'm really thrilled to be here with you today. I will try to keep it brief and just note as a disclaimer, I obviously will not be able to cover everything. This is an immense task that decision makers are faced with and indeed are spending lots of time thinking and talking about this with their colleagues and at the PrepCom. So today I just want to raise 3 key considerations, and they broadly are around 1, what expertise the STB or scientific and technical body may need. 2, who gets the opportunity to contribute this expertise as part of the STB? And 3, how can the STB, recognizing, like Leanne has said, might have a limited membership model depending on where states go, how can they access additional knowledge and expertise as needed? So the first consideration is around the expertise that's needed. And if we look at the text of the agreement, we know that there is a need for states to take into account multidisciplinary expertise, including relevant scientific and technical expertise, as well as expertise in traditional knowledge of Indigenous peoples in local communities. And these are side by side, and there's no hierarchy there. So this already gives us an idea of what type of expertise might be needed. However, we know, many of us here are within the scientific or research community, we know that there are so many different disciplines and diversity in these types of knowledge. So how do we decide who gets a place at the table? The first thing that we can do, and we can start now, is anticipating which disciplines might be needed. And there has been talk about this at the PrepCom, about whether or not we need a non-exhaustive indicative list of types of qualifications or expertise. And I don't know, personally, if that is the best use of the PrepCom's time, is figuring out this list. When looking around now, I see many people who could have a go at it from the scientific and research community. So that's a task that I'm giving to all of you to help support this process. And then, of course, once we have an idea of what might be needed, it's operationalizing these through terms of references and operational modalities, so the rules of procedure. And we see this under other bodies. For example, the ISA, they give a high-level indicative list of types of expertise that states might want to consider when they're nominating experts. However, we all know identifying expertise is only one part of the picture, and this brings me to my second point, and that is the consideration of who is able to contribute that expertise. So in Article 49, we know that in addition to multidisciplinary expertise, states must also take into account the need for gender balance and geographical representation. And again, there's no hierarchy here. So those are 3 considerations that all need to be considered together when nominating and or selecting members for the STB. And this may seem relatively easy on paper, but this is going to be a challenge and has proven challenging for other IFBs, instruments, frameworks, and bodies. And we know this. So we know from IOC UNESCO's Global Ocean Science reports that we still face significant disparity in who undertakes ocean science, both by gender and geographical location. And so this is going to impact the pool of expertise that states are nominating from. So when we're looking at who should be on that body, we also need to anchor our discussions in Part 5 of the agreement, which is capacity building and the development of marine technology, in order to strengthen and diversify the pool of experts that are available. And my third consideration is how the STB can draw on additional expertise as needed. If we have a limited membership body, we will need to bring in additional expertise when is needed. The mandate for this is clear in the agreement. Article 49 also sets out that the STB may draw on appropriate advice from IFBs, as well as scientists and experts as needed. So the question now remains, how do we make this work in practice? How do we operationalize this? And again, we've heard over the last 2 days in the panels that there's lots of opportunities, such as expert working groups, and we see this approach taken by other IFBs, such as the CBD, or consultation mechanisms which facilitate knowledge exchange between the STB and scientific bodies of other IFBs. We also want to consider how we can bring in expertise from other subsidiary bodies, because while the mandate that's in the text for the scientific and technical body relates primarily to EIAs and ABMTs, there will be considerations that might spring up regarding MGR. So we will want the scientific and technical body to consult and to work actively with the ABS committee and all the subsidiary bodies. So how do we do this in practice? This will require a reflexive and a learning-based approach, so something that's flexible and adaptive, so identifying and tracking gaps that may be missing in membership, modalities to feed back what types of gaps we're missing to states parties, maybe in the form of guidance, so that they can reflect on this when nominating for future membership rounds. So I'll just end with a quick overview of 2 important cross-cutting elements that I see that cross-cut across these 3 considerations that I've raised today. And the first is institutionalizing flexibility. We know from the scientific community, new science is going to emerge, new expertise may be needed, depending on the EIA that needs to be reviewed or the ABMT proposal. So we need something that moves quickly, that's flexible, and a way to bring in additional expertise when needed. And then lastly is anchoring all of our discussions and decisions in Part 5 of the agreement, not forgetting that strengthening and sharing capacity and technology is the backbone of this agreement and will help with not just implementing the STB, but the whole agreement. Thanks, Leanne.
Thank you so much, Christine. I think there was a small whoop from the audience, so well done. And I hope we have time to pick up on Part 5 as well as part of this discussion. You mentioned possible use of ancillary expertise outside the main body itself of 15, 25, 35 experts. I'd like to go to Carl, if I can please, online. Carl is, of course, the head of ICES at the moment and for a long time now. Carl, are you joining us online today?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you fine.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. Welcome, and I'm so sorry you're not here.
I am too.
Another time.
Yes.
So let's ask you, with regards to your experience in ICES. ICES delivers advice across many different types of expert groups, working groups. Peer review is a key aspect of delivering sound advice that gives any sort of scientific and technical body legitimacy. In your experience, can you speak to ICES' approach and experience in this and peer review and using expert groups, and what the BBNJ COP should consider to optimize the STB's ways of working?
Okay, yes, thanks, Leanne, and good morning to everyone in Rio. And thanks for the invitation to speak remotely. So picking up the first question around ICES' approach and experience, I'll try and give a brief background and some context. So the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea is an intergovernmental marine science organization, and we meet the needs for impartial evidence on the state and sustainable use of our seas and oceans. We do this through strategic partnerships for our work in the Atlantic Ocean, which extends into the Arctic, the Mediterranean Sea, the Black Sea, and the North Pacific Ocean. We have a council, which is our principal decision and policy-making body, and the council comprises a president, which is me at the moment, and 2 delegates appointed by each of our 19 member countries. ICES is a network of nearly 6,000 scientists from over 700 marine institutes from more than 70 countries. And annually, we have over 2,500 scientists that participate in our activities, including approximately 150 expert groups. We have a science committee called SciComm. That's the main scientific body of ICES, and it oversees all ICES scientific work. All our member countries have representatives on SciComm, and they're joined by representatives from other groups, including steering group chairs. Each of our steering groups addresses a broad and enduring range of science and advice, and also parents several expert groups. Some of these are one-time workshops, and in many cases, they're multi-annual working groups. Some of our high-priority dynamic and topical science areas often involve collaborations outside our member countries, and they're developed and coordinated by specialist groups. And SciComm members include representatives of groups dealing with data and information, science impact and publication, and training. In addition to SciComm, we also have an advisory committee, ACOM, which is the voice of ICES advice. And ACOM's role is to translate ICES science into advice on sustainable use, provision of services, and protection of marine ecosystems. And each ICES member country has a representative on the advisory committee. ACOM responds to requests for advice from obviously our member countries, also international commissions and organizations, and also fisheries and ecosystem management bodies. Our advice is grounded in 10 principles to support ecosystem-based management advice, and this ensures that our advice is based on the best available science and data. It's considered legitimate by both authorities and stakeholders, and is relevant and operational to the policy or management challenge in the question at hand. And ACOM provides advice to explore the consequences of trade-offs between objectives. And finally, ICES works with stakeholders to ensure that our advice is understandable and relevant to society. So hopefully that's a good answer to your first question. The second question you asked me was about what the BBNJ COP should consider to optimize the STB's ways of working. And in no particular order, but based on my experience, there's a number of things that the STB should do. So the first one is adhere to best science and data available at the time. Provide recommendations on how science and data flows can be developed and improved. It should generate and provide independent, credible, peer-reviewed science and advice. Its working and decision-making processes should be open and transparent. It should include only experts with expertise relevant to the issues addressed by the STB at a particular time. All experts should declare any conflicts of interest. The STB should operate under a code of ethics and professional conduct. It should develop principles of science and advice that define how the STB operates, which is really important. Decisions to be made by consensus. Clear and unambiguous advice should be developed and published. And it should create the capacity to draw on a wide range of scientific disciplines to address the wide scope of the BBNJ. And finally, it should create mechanisms within the STB to enable it to adjust its focus as new issues emerge. Because clearly, as the BBNJ starts to bed in and develop, there will be new areas of science and new areas of data and new areas of information. And finally, based on our experiences in ICES, we think that the STB should report its findings and advice to the BBNJ COP as the decision-making body. So thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of ICES and our experiences with the provision of science and advice. And I'd also like just to say thank you to you, the organisers and your hosts in Brazil. They've done a wonderful job allowing people like me to join remotely and also to follow online the various sessions and keynotes that are going on. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Carl. It is indeed going well, I think, overall here, so thank you.
Good.
And so far, so good. I think there's several points we'd like to pick up on with our next speaker, leading on from you, Carl. Could we get David online now, please? David representing Chair of IPBES. Thank you. Good morning, good day, David.
Good morning.
Hello. Yes, following on from some of Carl's points that he made, how ICES works and delivers the best available science, IPBES also provides global assessments for authorities and decision makers, and also has a very strong science-led approach to doing so. Can you pick up on some of the points that Carl had mentioned about the role of peer review and consultation in the context of how IPBES works? And what other ways of working does IPBES apply that could benefit the COP when it needs to outline the STB's ways of working?
Okay, thank you, Leanne, and thank you also to the organizers for enabling me to participate from Rome, so quite far away, but it's a pleasure to be here, even just like this. So perhaps adding on to the last speaker, and from IPBES's perspective, perhaps I can give a couple of points for a science and technical body to consider. Of course, IPBES, like the BBNJ, I mean, we're a state-led process, and the prerogative is always with the state members, of course. So the rules and procedures and the consultations that are had in establishing how things are run are, of course, critically important, and that they consider all the complexity of issues that may arise. And of course, this is perhaps highest for the open ocean, the biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, as is covered by the body that we're talking about. What I think critical to this process, what we have established through IPBES, and IPBES was formally established in 2012, so we're relatively young, just 14 years old now. And we really have three main structures. Of course, there's a plenary of the state members, but then supporting the scientific work, and our purpose is to provide the best available science and knowledge to support decision-making, is that we have the two statutory bodies. There's a bureau, which of course addresses the governance of our body, but a multidisciplinary expert panel of 25 members, which oversees the science that we do, and they're tasked with doing that. And there's 5 members from each of the 5 UN regions. Now, unlike perhaps the science and technical body, what we don't consider submissions, for approval by the plenary from various actors or members. We undertake major assessments, and then we have various supporting processes around those. So essentially, our scientific work is undertaken by assessment teams, which are constituted for anywhere from 2 to 4 years, depending on the size of the assessments, and they may have from 60 to 150 members or so. We also have 6 task forces that support the uptake and delivery of assessments and communications and outreach, and they each have perhaps 15 members on them. So we have a wide range of volunteer experts who are nominated and approved into our processes through quite extensive representational requirements and quality control, of course. And so the bulk of our technical work is undertaken by volunteer experts. And of course, they are supported by the Secretariat and technical support units, who are paid staff, who really are necessary to make this work happen. So I think this is an important consideration to think about for the STB, is what is the different roles and responsibilities of those who are nominated to support the process, and are they volunteers, the members of the STB, and how many are they? And what is the secretariat or paid staff or technical support units that are supporting them? Because of course, in considering various submissions, whether it's environmental impact assessments or proposals for area-based management, of course, these are going to be very time-based decisions that have to be taken, and reviews of the information and what their roles should be. Across all of our bodies, of course, our nominations come primarily from countries, from members. We have a 80% requirement, and the other 20% can come from independent institutions, universities, institutes, NGOs, and others. And of course, their role is very important. And then the other process that we invest in a lot in IPBES is how do we address indigenous and local knowledge and representation of the very varied knowledge systems from around the world in our various processes. And this is very important and requires a lot of procedural processes to be worked out. Of course, free, prior, and informed consent is particularly important in this regard. And I wonder, looking at some of the background I've seen for the STB, if, with 5 regions, how many indigenous and local practitioners or knowledge holders might be relevant to have, perhaps from regions, as opposed to being considered as a global representation as well. I think a big part of the processes that we require, and this is really picking up on the peer review and consultation that Carl mentioned, we have a very extensive process in IPBES. So many may be more familiar with the IPCC and the 3 working groups that the IPCC has, and how those working groups produce their reports, and these evolve over time in their scope. We don't have a regular cyclical process like that, and we essentially have the proposal of topics that primarily comes from countries and multilateral environmental assessments, but also from any stakeholder groups as well over time. So we undertake consultations, we get a lot of proposals for topics to cover in our assessments. And this may take several years to go through consideration with our plenaries in the countries about what some of the priorities might be. And then once priorities are identified for assessment, for example, now we have just produced a business and biodiversity assessment. We have one on monitoring biodiversity and spatial planning and connectivity happening. And then another one, our second global assessment, is in progress now. The scoping for these topics involves a workshop and really undertaking some thinking about what the content should be and having that reviewed by the members and decided at a plenary as well. And then when we actually produce the assessments, then those go through several rounds of review, and depending on the size of the assessment, they may have from 1 to 3 rounds of review. Open review by any knowledge holder, or anybody can sign up for that, as well as from governments as well. So these processes of review are very important, and perhaps I'll just finish with, I'm conscious of the time that we have, is that I think for the looking at the mandate of the STB, of course, in looking at submissions, that the issue of identifying horizon topics or key topics of interests and working out if, whether the STB can look at these, can do studies on them and so on, and be a bit proactive with some foresight sort of procedures could be very important. And that perhaps comes back to the reflexivity that was mentioned by the first speaker in keeping aspects under review for considering major topics that affect biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. So I think I'll stop with that for now and hand it back to you in the hall. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much, and I'm very happy you picked up on the procedural aspects of involving Indigenous peoples and local communities too in providing advice and expertise. That's something I hope the next panel can pick up on as well, and look to organizations like IPBES and their approaches as well. Sejen, I'll move to you next. The previous speakers so far have mentioned words like reflexivity, adaptivity, time-bound, time constraints. This is about looking at the STB as a proactive body and not necessarily just following necessarily the text in the agreement perfectly, but being proactive. So there's a lot of potential for the STB to go beyond delivering advice and making the evaluations for COP. What steps could COP take to ensure the STB is proactive?
Thanks, Anne-Lee, for the introduction and this question. I think the scientific and technical body is critical for the successful implementation of BBNJ. I prepared some comments about this. I think the first one is to ensure that the STB becomes proactive. The copy should give it mandate flexibility, access to external expertise, resources for independent work. I think this is quite important. And institutional links to global ocean science network. We have many networks in this area, especially observation, ocean observation, monitoring. These are very key points that we should explore in this body. I think this could transform the STB from reactive advisory body into a dynamic science policy interface supporting adaptive BBNJ agreement. Some points I try to raise here. One, it's the engagement with external scientific networks, as has been said already, including this monitoring, ocean monitoring, of course. We have in the previous panel some intervention from FAO and the procedures they are taking in terms of data and processing this data. I think it's quite important also. Thematic working groups that include these expertise, external expertise. Regular science policy dialogue platforms. I think this interaction, it's quite important too. Formal collaboration with existing global scientific bodies, and to ensure that the best available knowledge and data to support proactive and adaptive decision-making. This is quite important too. And one point that I would like to emphasize here, it's the updated technology. I think we are progressing rapidly in technology. Technology is dominating our societies. And I think we should update the methods that have been used. Otherwise, the challenge will be impossible to be achieved. I think we have autonomous vehicles nowadays. We have artificial intelligence to help us to processing this huge amount of data. And genomics, it's another key point to be explored. And I think without this modern technology, the main tasks of BBNJ will be very difficult to be achieved. And I would place a lot of emphasis on technology, on this scientific and technical body. Some examples here I select is, as I already mentioned, autonomous underwater vehicles. We know that the ship cost is very, very expensive. We should work with autonomous vehicles. AUVs, ROVs, drones, aquatic drones, and all these initiatives should involve not only the developing countries, but also the small and underdeveloped countries also in operation these kind of equipment. The other point is associated with environment DNA. I think the technologies today are very advanced, and a specialized group should be work together with our body to have much quicker results. The big challenge, I think, it's the velocity we are able to process the data. To get the data, it's a challenge and very expensive, but processing, it's necessary to be the adequate velocity. Otherwise, the decision-making will be in jeopardy. The other thing that I would like to mention here, it's low-cost equipment. Nowadays, we have some suppliers. We have to convince these suppliers that the amount of equipment will multiply the demand. And if this demand multiply, we should look for low-cost equipment. The equipments now for oceanography research are very, very expensive. We must take care of these, and we must provide incentives that we could work with low-cost equipment. As an example, we can see the drones today that we can buy for $10, $20 a drone. Of course, we cannot use this drone for high seas, but we can see that low-cost equipments are possible and feasible, and we should look for these kind of solutions. I think I will stop here.
Thank you, thank you so much, Sergio. That's excellent. And the tech team were showing your slides while we went, but thank you so much for that. And it's very nice having you on the panel as well, because you mentioned technology. And we forget the T in STB sometimes, and technology was mentioned earlier. We're going to need technological experts on that body. But what kind of technology, what kind of expertise? That needs a lot of thinking about. I've one more question for this time for Julian, picking up on what everyone has said. And thank you for joining us today on stage, Julian. What lessons from your own work on IOC UNESCO acting as an intergovernmental science policy mechanism could be translated to the work of the STB of BBNJ agreement?
Thank you very much, and I'm sorry if I say the word interoperability a couple of times in my intervention.
We have a few minutes.
But I mean, first of all, thank you for inviting us to this event. I mean, the IOC is a little bit different in a way that it's not responding to a special treaty, or it's not a convention, but it acts as a global intergovernmental platform, bringing together the scientists and the decision makers at country level to to generate knowledge, to manage cooperation and coordination in ocean science. So I think we all want this this treaty, the BBNJ treaty, to have really this strong science policy interface built in, and of course the role of the STB is going to be quite essential. And I mean, from our perspective, I think what is important is that we really create a strong institutional bridge between the scientific communities and the decision-making process of the agreement. From the IOC perspective, we act a little bit as a boundary organization. We have government sitting alongside experts within our governance structures. We have scientific programs that feed directly into intergovernmental deliberations, and then we have specific products or knowledge products and services that are tailored to to basically also translate into policy relevant outputs and not just academic exercise or articles. So I think from the STB point of view, what's important is that really we create that articulation between the STB and the different organs of a treaty, of course the COP, but also broader. I mean, we really need to have a 360-degree overview of how we report back to the countries and bring that knowledge and guidance, but also how we work across the different subsidiary bodies, particularly on capacity development, which I think is has been mentioned by Christine, is an important element, because we have also big issues in ocean science capacities worldwide, and that could potentially hinder the participation of some parties into the process. So I think we need to think about that. We also need to think about how we use the global scientific networks, and I think Jen mentioned this already, and not just purely put all our investments on the centralized structure. It is, of course, important to have that, but we need to really rely and leverage the different scientific networks that exist. I mean, from the IOC perspective, we mobilize international research communities through observing systems, for example. We have a global ocean observing systems, and that's also been mentioned. But also we need to work, through the regional lens as well, and also, look at the existing cooperation mechanisms that we have amongst countries at the ocean basin scales. So I think we need to really be able to access that large multidisciplinary expertise to capture that innovation. Look at how we also are getting better at integrating some of the data that are emerging from the ocean. And I just want to highlight the work of our Sagasso-C colleagues here who are doing this socio-ecological diagnostic analysis, which I think is quite novel in the way to bring this data together. We also need to look at how we basically connect the STB with those different initiatives, scientific initiatives, so that the STB could, in a sense, become a little bit of a steward for enabling a kind of scientific research infrastructures, globally. That also requires that the STB would have the capacity to engage, with some of those initiatives, and I think that's potentially something that I think is in the agreement, but having MOUs, partnership agreements, is going to be important so that we can also generate that collaboration. I think the further aspect I want to highlight is open data and shared knowledge infrastructure, because in a sense, open interoperable ocean data is going to be, I think, a key element to really ensure that the governance process is effective and also is trusted, is authoritative. And I think in those areas, we do work a lot in creating standards for data exchange. We have an open data policy, which is in theory adopted by all 152 member states of a commission. So this is also an important mechanism to generate this, and also ensure that through the clearinghouse mechanisms we have guidance provided by the STB in terms of some of those standards and attributes we want in the data exchange mechanism. I think we've mentioned the indigenous and local knowledge systems. I mean, in the IOC, we start integrating this more and more. We have also the Ocean Decade, which defines ocean knowledge in a broad term and also includes indigenous and local knowledge systems. And I think the agreement, I think, is quite novel in the sense that it can really open a new opportunity for collaboration with high LK holders in co-production of knowledge, but also in aspects related to observation, for example, community-based observation. So I think we need to have the STB to also generate guidance to parties on how to promote the engagement of ILK holders in the BBNJ procedures. Maybe one last aspect I would like to highlight. I think if I mentioned that when we think about the design of the STB and the importance of having that it has a capacity to engage with and leverage existing ocean initiatives, we need to also ensure that potentially the organizations that have a key role and a key mandate are potentially also sitting on the STB as observers, and I think there's a decision that will need to be taken by the PrepCom. But again, looking at this capacity to create cooperative agreements, as well as the aspect related to regional inputs into the STB, and I think that is going to be very important. We will have regional and geographic distribution as in all UN bodies. But that is something that needs to be connected to the communities on the ground. So I think we need to think about how we generate and provide this kind of collaborative regional frameworks around the BBNJ and the science of the BBNJ as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julian. Thank you. And what everything you've just said really just describes, without saying it, a more proactive STB. Be prepared to engage, work with other bodies, commissions. And interestingly, you mentioned the Sargasso Sea Commission's CEDA work, the socio-ecological diagnostic analysis, which I believe involves some sort of aspect of economic socioeconomic impacts and such. There is a question that we've had online from on Slido. I'd like to read it out just as we have a bit of time for questions. Anyone on the panel online, David, Carl, or anyone here is welcome to help us answer it. It's regarding whether economists should sit on the STB. And the question is, decisions about where to cite ABMT proposals, like MPAs, will need nature, economy, and social trade-offs to be considered. So we also need economists on the STB, I suppose. And I'm also now thinking, of course, for environmental impact assessments, there might be a socioeconomic element of that. Should economists be on the STB? And anyone's welcome to take that one on. Online, David, Carl, or Christine, and anyone?
Well,
So who do we have on? Great. Hello. Online again, David.
so I wouldn't mind just saying very briefly on this. Of course, we must have a full scope of natural and social and sort of humanities, sciences or disciplines represented, in addition to the indigenous and local knowledge. So I would say the brief answer to that would be yes.
We've got Christine.
I will just quickly jump that I agree. If we look at some of the indicative criteria that may be applied for identifying areas in need of protection, there are considerations around socio-economics, and so having somebody with that type of expertise makes sense.
Just a comment. I think one key point is the requirements for the protected areas. I think this is, we should think more carefully about these, because economics and social impact has a lot to do with these requirements. And I think economics play a role in these requirements, I think.
No, just to say I completely agree with everyone else. And if you look at ecosystems and ecosystem services, you need to capture the economic dimension and the social dimension. So,
yeah. Looks like we've got some agreement. I'm not going to disagree. Can I go to, thank you very much, by the way, that was excellent. And it was an excellent question as well, because we do focus a lot on the science and the technology. But having economists on board, of course, and social scientists, I think, were mentioned in the draft terms of references at PrepCom too. So there's momentum building on that. There's a couple of questions in the audience, if I could get a mic to people. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the really insightful panel. Thanks. I found all your contributions very valuable. I think I'm going to ask a perhaps unpopular question in a room of many scientists, and perhaps informed by some trauma from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change negotiations. But very keen to hear your views, and this in particular with the backdrop that we know that science has been predominantly done by certain regions. We know that there is some criticism that has been made already of science, especially and here speaking specifically from the climate space. I think it's worth reflecting on the fact that the STB will be making recommendations to a political body. Right? So we know that these recommendations, once made to that political body, then becomes, and quite frankly, MPAs are very political decisions. All right? So my question is really around what do we need to do to ensure that the STB's recommendations are not relitigated by the COP? Because it then gets into the hands of a political body that will do what political bodies do. And I can think of a couple of ways, but I'd love to hear your insights on that, particularly because we certainly do not want to have a situation where the STB spends all its time doing this very robust assessment of the proposal that it receives, for it to then go up to the COP, and the COP sort of redoes all that work. How do we ensure that there is a strong STB and one that doesn't lead to this outcome that's, I think really in the realm of possibility if we're not careful?
Yeah, sometimes scientific advice, even the best scientific advice, isn't taken up by authorities and decision makers. I'm not putting any pressure on Carl to step in on that one necessarily, but anyone is welcome to answer that question. Very important.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I guess one of the problems is policymakers will want to use the best available science. The approach that ICES has taken is when we have requests and then have to produce advice, there's an iterative process where we work with the policymakers and the requesters to make sure that we're being asked the right scientific questions. We also clarify the objectives behind the scientific investigations and the type of advice that's being asked, and also identify the risks in terms of either following the science or not following the science. So I think it's recognizing that scientists have to do the best job they can with the best available information. There's always a job of translating that into something that policymakers can understand and can use, but there has to be a dialogue between the scientists and the policymakers, and in this case, the COP, to make sure that we as scientists don't just end up doing science which is then ignored. We have to be part of the process that identifies the right questions and make sure that we provide the right answers. And we also need to make sure that, as with ICES, the scientific process isn't interfered with by the policymakers. They need to understand what the science says. They're free to ignore it, they're free to modify it, but they need to be aware of what the risks are and also the sorts of questions they're asking.
Yeah, I'll jump in, and I most definitely agree. There's lots of different ways that we can equip the scientific and technical body so that its advice has a higher chance of being listened to. But I'm going to take a more people-centered approach for my answer, and that is trying to build buy-in right from the beginning. So as humans, we all like to be involved. We trust things that we feel that we've been involved and been aware of the processes. So what that might look like for the STB is ensuring representation, ensuring equitable representation, ensuring consultation mechanisms that reach all relevant stakeholders, and just being transparent with how the work is undertaken and the outcomes of what ends up in the final reports, but also what doesn't.
No, I think I fully agree. I think robustness, transparency, and communications are the parameters that are going to make the work of a STB, legitimate, authoritative, and eventually influential.
Thank you. I heard an alarm go off, but I'm afraid there's no more question times. Unless we dig into coffee, there might be a bit of a hurtful comment about that. No. One more question? Okay, riveted to her seat. Let's take one more question, please.
Actually, it'll be quick because it's not so much a question as an observation. As you know from yesterday, those of you there, I was representing Sargasso Sea Commission and the project, but I'm also a member of something called GSAMP, which some of you may have heard of and may not have heard of. I'm actually the past chair, but I'm now just a humble member. GSAMP is the joint group of the UN joint group of experts for the scientific aspects of marine environmental protection. And it's been operating for over 50 years now. We have 16 global experts. Oh gosh, I'm going to look at myself on the screen, that rather threw me. 16 global experts in various fields, atmospheric chemistry, right through to climate change, we have economists, etc. And we advise the 10 UN bodies that deal with the ocean, including IOC UNESCO, as Julian knows well. And there are a lot of lessons that can be learnt from that body. Some of the issues raised here about how the science gets through to the policymakers without being tripped up is something we have dealt with so many times to maintain the independence of that group of experts when we've actually clashed on occasions with some of the UN bodies over that expertise. And it comes down to, I can't remember which one of the speakers said, it was Carl, I believe, online, or one of them, forgive me, that we can give you the advice, and we'll give you the best advice. Whether you take it or not is up to you at the policy and governance level. But don't come back to us and ask us to change our advice just because you don't like it. So over 50 years of experience there, really the scientific and technical body, when it's formulating itself, should look very closely at GSAMP and how GSAMP is operated. So just an observation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. That's an excellent intervention there. And yes, there's so many bodies to learn from. I hope the STB composition, that next draft terms of reference gets decided. There's so much to cover for the first COP. Goodness, I hope the STB is ready to go by the end of it. We'll see. I'm going to pass over to Hermione to close this session before coffee, but I first want to thank everyone for joining us online and on stage, for traveling all the way to your beautiful country, Seja, including you. So you're here locally. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leanne, and to all your wonderful contributors. So this has been an incredible 2.5 hours of day 2. We started with Alexander Tura's fantastic keynote, then those brilliant presentations about implementation, compliance, and enforcement, and then a really wonderful discussion here about the scientific and technical body. So it is now time for a well-earned coffee. We will be back here at midday at 12 noon for panel 6, which is all about traditional and local knowledge in the BBNJ implementation. Just one heads up before you go. The museum is not open today, but we have arranged special access at 4 p.m. for anybody from the delegation wishing to pop into the really exciting ocean exhibition just behind the auditorium. So bear that in mind for your planning at 4 p.m. I'll see you back here at midday, and online viewers, we'll see you back in half an hour. Thank you, bye.